My name is Marlene Dorothy Hutchins, and I am 68 years old. What I'm about to share happened 4 years ago, during what I believed would be the final chapter of a life marked by tragedy, guilt, and self-imposed exile. This is a story about drowning in your own mistakes and learning to swim again, about discovering that the very trauma that destroyed you can become the foundation for saving others. My story begins on a rain-soaked April evening 4 years ago. I was standing in my kitchen, staring at a bottle of sleeping pills on the counter, wondering if tonight would finally be the night I found the courage to end the unbearable weight of living with what I had done. The kitchen was silent, except for the sound of rain hammering against the windows, a silence that had defined my existence for 23 years. 23 years earlier, I had been a different person entirely. I was a successful real estate agent, beloved grandmother, an active community member with 2 children and 3 grandchildren. My life was full of Sunday dinners, school plays, neighborhood barbecues, and the comfortable rhythm of suburban existence. But on August 14th, I destroyed all of that in a single moment of catastrophic negligence. It was a beautiful summer Saturday. My daughter Rebecca had asked me to watch her 2 boys, 7-year-old Daniel and 4-year-old Christopher, while she and her husband attended a wedding. We had planned a perfect day: swimming, grilling hamburgers, watching movies. The morning was wonderful. We swam for hours, the boys shrieking with delight. Christopher, just learning to swim, wore bright orange floaties. Daniel, a confident swimmer, performed underwater tricks for his little brother. Around 2 in the afternoon, we came inside for lunch. I made peanut butter sandwiches and poured lemonade. Then the phone rang. My son Thomas calling about a property listing. What should have been a 5-minute call stretched to 22 minutes as I discussed inspection reports and financing options in my home office. When I finally returned to the kitchen, both boys were gone. The sliding glass door was open, and floating face down in the pool, his orange floaties still on his arms, was Christopher. The next moments exist as fractured images. My screaming, pulling Christopher's small body from the water, dialing 911, performing CPR. Daniel standing frozen by the pool's edge, his face white with terror. Christopher died at the hospital 3 hours later. He had been underwater too long. Even if he had survived, the doctors explained, he would have had severe, irreversible brain damage. Rebecca arrived in time to say goodbye. I will never forget her face when she saw Christopher lying still on the hospital bed, or the sound she made, something more primal and broken than any sound should be. "Where were you?" she asked, her eyes wild with grief and rage. "Where were you while my baby was drowning?" "I was on the phone," I whispered. "I thought they were still eating lunch." "You thought? My son is dead because you thought?" The inquiry concluded that Christopher's death was a tragic accident resulting from inadequate supervision. No criminal charges would be filed. But the absence of criminal charges did nothing to absolve my guilt. Rebecca never spoke to me again. "I have no mother," she told Thomas flatly. "My mother died the same day my son did." For 23 years, I lived in self-imposed isolation. I sold my house with a pool, moved to a small apartment, cut ties with my real estate agency, and withdrew from every social connection. Friends who reached out were met with silence. I didn't deserve their kindness. Thomas tried to maintain contact for the first year, but eventually the distance became permanent. I became a ghost to my family, a cautionary tale, erased from the family narrative. The weight of guilt became my constant companion. It woke me each morning with memories of Christopher's small body in the pool. It accompanied me through empty days of television programs I didn't watch and books whose plots I forgot. It whispered that the world would be better if I simply ceased to exist. I thought about suicide regularly, not dramatically, but as a logical solution to an unbearable situation. Yet some stubborn part of me resisted. Ending my life felt like another act of selfishness, another escape from responsibility. That rainy April evening 4 years ago, instead of swallowing the pills, I did something unexpected. I turned on my computer and searched ways to help after causing harm. One result caught my attention: restorative justice programs for those struggling with guilt. I found the Center for Redemptive Action, a nonprofit helping people who had caused harm find constructive ways to process guilt and contribute positively. Guilt and shame are natural responses to causing harm, the website explained. But when guilt becomes a prison that prevents growth and contribution, it serves no one. The people we harmed don't benefit from our suffering. They need us to become better, to help prevent similar harm, to transform our worst moments into wisdom that protects others. For 23 years, I had believed suffering was my duty, that punishing myself honored Christopher's memory. But what if I was wrong? What if my isolation actually dishonored his life by ensuring nothing good could come from his death? I read testimonials from people who had caused car accidents, workplace injuries, medical errors, people who had lived with crushing guilt but found ways to channel their pain into prevention, education, and service. One testimonial resonated deeply. I killed someone through my negligence. I will carry that weight forever. But I realized that I could carry that weight while moving forward, or I could carry it while standing still. Either way, the weight remains. But only one option allows me to prevent others from making my mistakes. By dawn, I had made a decision. I couldn't bring Christopher back or earn Rebecca's forgiveness, but maybe I could ensure fewer families experienced what mine had endured. I called the Center for Redemptive Action and was connected to their water safety prevention program, coordinated by Harold Briggs, whose teenage son had drowned 12 years earlier. 2 weeks later, I attended my first meeting. 15 people were present: parents who had lost children, siblings, survivors, and people like me who had been responsible for someone's drowning. When my turn came to share, I forced myself to speak the truth. My name is Marlene. 23 years ago, I left my 2 grandsons unsupervised near my pool to take a phone call. My 4-year-old grandson drowned. My daughter hasn't spoken to me since. I haven't forgiven myself. I'm here because I don't know how to live with what I did, but I can't keep living the way I've been living either. Harold responded, "Thank you for your honesty, Marlene. Everything you're feeling, everyone in this room has felt those things. But we've learned that those feelings don't have to define our entire existence. We can carry our guilt while also doing work that prevents other families from experiencing what we've experienced." I started volunteering, beginning with basic tasks: organizing equipment, distributing materials, assisting with administration. Harold paired me with Sylvia Chen, a grandmother who had lost her granddaughter in a bathtub drowning. "Some days I can barely function," Sylvia confessed. "But sitting at home, replaying my failure, contributing nothing, that doesn't honor Mei Lin. Teaching other children skills that might save their lives gives my continued existence some purpose." 3 weeks into volunteering, Harold asked me to assist with a parent education session about pool safety. He suggested I share my personal story. I stood before 30 parents, trembling. My name is Marlene. 23 years ago, I left my 4-year-old grandson unsupervised near my pool for 22 minutes while I took a phone call. My grandson drowned. I was in the next room while he was dying 30 feet away. The room became silent. I continued. I thought I was careful. I had a pool fence, safety equipment, years of experience. But I made a mistake that took 22 minutes, and it cost my grandson his life. It destroyed my family. My daughter will never speak to me again, and I don't blame her. I will never forgive myself. I explain that drowning doesn't happen because parents are negligent. It happens to competent, loving people who make one small mistake at the wrong moment. It happens faster than imaginable. Drowning is silent. No splashing, no screaming. After the presentation, several parents approached me. A mother hugged me and whispered, "I take my phone by the pool all the time. I didn't understand. Thank you for helping me understand." Over the following months, I became increasingly involved. I completed lifeguard training and CPR certification. I assisted with swimming lessons for low-income children. But my primary role became storytelling, sharing Christopher's story to prevent similar tragedies. I received letters from families thanking me. One from Juanita Morales particularly moved me. She wrote that after hearing my presentation, she stayed by the pool during a family party instead of helping prepare food inside. 40 minutes in, her 4-year-old son Miguel silently slipped underwater. Because she was watching, she jumped in immediately and pulled him out. He was fine. "My son is alive because you were brave enough to speak," she wrote. 2 years into my volunteer work, Harold approached me about testifying before the state legislature on new pool safety regulations. 3 weeks later, I testified before the House Committee on Public Safety. 25 years ago, I was a successful real estate agent, mother of 2, grandmother of 3. I owned a beautiful home with a swimming pool. I had everything I thought defined a good life. I paused. Today, I'm a grandmother of 2 because I let my 4-year-old grandson drown in that pool while I was taking a phone call. Today, my daughter hasn't spoken to me in 23 years. Today, I live alone with guilt that will never diminish. I explained how every safety provision in the proposed bill, pool fences, self-closing gates, covers, alarms, represented a barrier between children and death. You have the power to prevent other families from experiencing what mine has endured, I concluded. Pass this bill. Make pools safer. Give children the protection my grandson didn't have. 2 weeks later, the bill passed unanimously and eventually became law. The most meaningful development came through Lori Pemberton, a family therapist who specialized in grief, trauma, and impossible forgiveness. "You've also experienced severe trauma," Lori told me. "The death of your grandson, the complete loss of your family, 2 decades of isolation, those experiences have traumatized you, regardless of your culpability." She explained moral injury, a deep psychological wound from violating one's own values and causing serious harm to others. "Marlene, you spent 23 years punishing yourself. Has it brought Christopher back? Has it reconciled you with Rebecca? Has it made you a better person?" "No," I admitted. "What if healing allows you to carry your guilt without being destroyed by it?" The breakthrough came when Lori asked what I would tell another grandmother with an identical story. "Would you tell her she deserves to suffer forever?" "No," I said immediately. "I'd tell her she made a terrible mistake, but that didn't make her worthless, that she could channel her guilt into prevention work. So why don't those same principles apply to you?" The question broke something open. I cried harder than I had since Christopher's death, grieving not just for him, but for myself, for 23 years in psychological prison. 3 years into my volunteer work, Harold asked me to participate in a documentary about water safety. Director Cordelia Banks interviewed me over several days, asking me to describe that August afternoon in minute detail. The most difficult part was returning to my old house. Standing beside the pool after 23 years, I could see Christopher exactly as I had found him, could feel the weight of his small body, could hear my own screaming echoing across the years. "Tell me what you're feeling," Cordelia said gently. "I'm feeling like I should have died instead of him, like this pool is a grave, like I'm standing at the site of a murder I committed. I will always be the grandmother who let her grandson drown. And yet you're still here. You're still doing the work. Why? Because the alternative is worse. If I gave up, Christopher's death would mean nothing beyond loss. But if his death leads to changes that save other children, then maybe there's some redemption in that. Not forgiveness, not absolution, but purpose, meaning, a reason to keep living. The documentary, titled Silent Waters: The Hidden Epidemic of Child Drowning, premiered 18 months later. The response was overwhelming. Within days, the Water Safety Coalition's website crashed from traffic. Thousands of parents reached out about swimming lessons, safety equipment, CPR training. But along with positive response came public judgment and vitriol. Online commenters were brutal. She deserves to suffer. She's still a child killer. Harold called me after a particularly vicious social media pile-on. People who have never experienced real tragedy find it easy to judge. They need to believe something like this could never happen to them. ... The turning point came 6 months after the documentary's release. I received an email with the subject line, "From Rebecca." My hands shook as I opened it. "Marlene, someone sent me the documentary. I watched it. I'm writing to tell you 3 things. First, I will never forgive you for Christopher's death. That hasn't changed and will never change. Second, I understand now what you've been doing. I saw your testimony, your volunteer work, the children you've helped. Martis and I looked up the statistics on how many children are projected to be saved by the regulations you advocated for. Third, your prevention work doesn't erase what you did. It doesn't make us family again. But it does mean that I no longer wish you were dead. For 23 years, I've carried rage and hatred alongside my grief. Watching you take full responsibility, watching you do something constructive with your guilt, it's allowed me to let go of some of that rage. Daniel is 30 now. He's been in therapy for years. Recently, he told me he wants to become a swimming instructor. He's been following your advocacy work. He's proud of what you're doing, even though he can't bring himself to contact you directly. Your work matters to us, even if we can't be part of your life. Keep doing what you're doing. Keep telling Christopher's story. Keep saving children. But don't contact me. I'm not ready for that, and I don't know if I ever will be. This email is acknowledgement, not reconciliation. Rebecca, it wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't restoration of our relationship, but it was recognition that my prevention work had meaning. I called Harold the next morning. I want to expand the program. Rebecca's email made me realize this work isn't about earning forgiveness. It's about doing what I can to prevent other families from experiencing what mine has endured. Over the next year, our prevention program grew dramatically. I worked with Lori to develop a specialized program for people living with moral injury, individuals who had caused harm through accidents, mistakes, or negligence. The first meeting of our moral injury support group included 8 people: a driver who had caused the fatal car accident, a parent whose child had died from medication given incorrectly, a teacher whose student had committed suicide after being bullied, and others whose mistakes had led to tragedy. We're not here to minimize what we've done, I told the group. We're here because we need to figure out how to live with what we've done, how to carry our guilt without being destroyed by it. One participant, Gerald Fitzpatrick, described the group as the only place where people understand that I can be both genuinely remorseful and also need to keep living. 4 years into my prevention work, I was invited to speak at a national conference on child safety. As I stood backstage, I reflected on how completely my life had changed. 4 years earlier, I had been standing in my kitchen with sleeping pills, convinced my life had no value. I walked onto the stage. 4 years ago, I was a woman who had spent 23 years punishing myself for a mistake that cost my grandson his life. I had no relationships, no purpose. I was seriously considering suicide when I stumbled upon information about restorative action for people who had caused harm. I told them the full story and described the principles we had developed: acknowledging harm fully, accepting accountability without accepting worthlessness, channeling guilt into constructive action, allowing healing without demanding forgiveness. Accountability doesn't require self-destruction, I concluded. What requires honesty, genuine remorse, and commitment to preventing similar harm. Those of us who have caused tragedy have a choice. We can let our guilt render us useless, or we can use our painful experience to benefit others. The standing ovation surprised me. After my presentation, dozens of attendees approached me, professionals who carried their own guilt about failures and harm caused. That night, I received a text from an unknown number. "This is Daniel, Rebecca's son, your grandson. I was at the conference today. I heard your speech. I'm proud of who you've become. I'm not ready to have a relationship yet, but I wanted you to know I was there. Christopher would be 27 now. Because of your work, there are children who will reach 27 who might not have otherwise. That means something. Daniel." The following year brought unexpected developments. A major children's hospital invited me to develop a comprehensive water safety program. A foundation funded national expansion of our moral injury support groups, and I was asked to co-author a book with Lori about transforming guilt into constructive action. The book, titled "Carrying the Weight: Living Purposefully After Causing Harm," was published 2 years after the documentary and found an unexpected audience. Not just people who had caused tragedies, but anyone living with regret or failure. 5 years into my prevention work, a woman named Esperanza visited one of our training sessions. "You taught my children to swim 3 years ago," she said. "My son Marco was terrified of water, but you helped him feel safe. After 6 months, he learned to swim." Her voice broke. "Last summer, Marco's younger sister Isabella fell into the deep end of a pool. Marco jumped in immediately and kept her above water until adults could pull them out. You saved my daughter's life by teaching my son the skills he needed to save her." After Esperanza left, I sat alone, processing her words. Isabella would grow up, have experiences, relationships, perhaps children of her own, because of skills I had taught her brother. That evening, I wrote to Rebecca, sharing what had happened. 3 days later, she replied, telling me that Daniel wanted to meet with me. 2 weeks later, I met Daniel at a coffee shop. He was 33, a marine biologist who had recently decided to pursue swimming instruction. "I remember that day," Daniel said. "I remember Christopher asking if we could go back to the pool. I've spent 26 years blaming myself for not saving him." "Daniel, you were 7 years old. What happened was not your fault. It was mine." We talked for 3 hours. Daniel told me about his struggles with anxiety and depression. I told him about my 23 years of isolation and the prevention work. "I want to be part of what you're doing," Daniel said. "I need to do something constructive with all this guilt and loss I've been carrying." Over the following months, Daniel became increasingly involved in our programs. He was a gifted swimming instructor with unusual empathy for fearful children. 6 months later, Daniel called with unexpected news. "Mom wants to meet with you." The meeting was arranged for a park where Rebecca and I had once taken the boys. I arrived early, my hands shaking, my heart racing. Rebecca arrived exactly on time. We sat on a bench overlooking a small lake. "I've hated you for 26 years, Rebecca said. "I've wished you were dead. But my therapist helped me understand that my hatred was hurting me more than it was hurting you. She helped me see that I could acknowledge your humanity without forgiving what you did. I don't expect forgiveness," I said. "I don't deserve it." "No, you don't," Rebecca agreed. "You took my son from me through negligence. That's unforgivable. But Daniel showed me the statistics on how many children your advocacy work has saved. You've saved dozens of children's lives, maybe hundreds. That doesn't bring Christopher back, but it means something. It means his death wasn't just pointless tragedy." We talked for hours about Christopher, who he had been, what he had loved, how his death had affected us all. I don't know if I can ever have a normal mother-daughter relationship with you, Rebecca said as we prepared to part. But I don't want you to die anymore. I want you to keep doing the work you're doing. Keep saving children. Keep making Christopher's death mean something. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't full reconciliation. But it was more than I had dared hope for in 26 years. Now, 4 years after that rainy April evening when I stood in my kitchen contemplating suicide, I find myself living a life I never could have imagined. I coordinate water safety programs in 6 states. I've trained over 300 advocates. I speak regularly at conferences, schools, and community centers. The moral injury support groups I helped establish now operate in 42 cities. The book Lori and I wrote has been translated into 7 languages. My relationship with Rebecca remains complicated and limited. We meet quarterly for brief conversations, always focused on Christopher's memory and the prevention work. We will never be close the way we once were, but we are no longer completely severed, and that matters. Daniel has become a beloved swimming instructor and an important voice in our advocacy work. Together, we represent the full spectrum of harm, the person who caused it, the person who witnessed it, and the ongoing work of prevention and healing. Most importantly, I wake up each morning with a sense of purpose. The guilt about Christopher's death remains. It'll never leave, but it no longer paralyzes me. Instead, it motivates me to do everything in my power to prevent other families from experiencing what mine endured. 3 months ago, I received a letter from a teenager named Brianna, who had nearly drowned at age 6, but had been saved by a cousin who learned CPR through one of our community programs. "Dear Mrs. Hutchins," Brianna wrote, "I'm 16 now. I don't know exactly what to say except thank you. Thank you for turning your worst experience into something that saves lives. Thank you for not giving up when you probably wanted to. I'm alive because of what you did after he died. I'm going to prom next month. I'm going to graduate high school. I'm going to college. I'm going to have a life, all because you decided that your guilt should motivate service instead of self-destruction." I keep Brianna's letter on my desk, along with photos of other children our programs have helped. Marco, who saved his sister Isabella. Daniel, who transformed his trauma into teaching. Dozens of others whose lives were touched or saved by the work that grew from Christopher's death and my catastrophic failure. If I could share one message from my journey, it would be this: the worst moments of our lives don't have to define our entire existence. We can carry terrible guilt, can acknowledge unspeakable failures, can accept that we've caused irreversible harm, and still build lives of meaning and purpose. Redemption isn't about erasing what we've done. It's not about earning forgiveness or achieving some state where our failures no longer matter. Redemption is about doing what we can with the life we have left, about using our painful experiences to benefit others, about ensuring that our worst moments lead to something beyond pure destruction. You cannot undo the past. You cannot bring back what was lost. You cannot earn absolution for the unforgivable, but you can wake up each morning and choose to do something constructive with your guilt. You can channel your pain into prevention. You can transform your failures into wisdom that protects others. The weight doesn't disappear. You learn to carry it. And sometimes, if you're fortunate, you discover that the weight you're carrying can become ballast that steadies you, that grounds you in purpose, that connects you to others who need what you've learned through suffering. Christopher would have been 28 years old now. I think about him every single day, not just about his death, but about who he might have become. And then I think about Marco, Isabella, Brianna, and the dozens of other children who are alive, who are growing up, who are building lives because of work that exists only because Christopher died. It's not enough. It will never be enough, but it's something. And sometimes when guilt threatens to drown me the way water drowned Christopher, I remember that something is infinitely better than nothing. That purpose is infinitely better than despair. That carrying this weight while moving forward is infinitely better than carrying it while standing still. The water that took my grandson's life taught me about drowning, but it also taught me about staying afloat, about swimming through grief, about helping others reach the shore. We are all treading water in some way, trying to keep our heads above the surface of our regrets and failures. My hope is that by sharing my story, by doing this work, by transforming my catastrophic failure into something that protects children, I can help others stay afloat too. Keep swimming, keep serving, keep transforming your worst moments into your most meaningful work. The weight you carry might become the foundation for saving someone else from drowning. And remember, it's never too late to learn how to swim through your guilt towards something resembling purpose, peace, and the radical possibility that lives shaped by tragedy can still contribute beauty and safety to the world. A note: thank you for taking the time to listening Marlene's story. This narrative explores difficult themes: guilt, accountability, grief, and the possibility of finding purpose after causing irreversible harm. I'd love to hear from you. Your thoughts on this story. What was your emotional response while reading Marlene's journey? Did any particular moment or scene resonate with you most strongly? Do you think Marlene's path toward redemption was realistic, satisfying? How do you feel about Rebecca's response, both her inability to forgive and her eventual acknowledgement of Marlene's work? What did you think about Daniel's role in the story and his own journey with guilt? Your own stories. Do you have a story about guilt, redemption, or finding purpose after failure that you'd be willing to share? Have you experienced or witnessed someone transform personal tragedy into meaningful service? How have you dealt with mistakes or failures in your own life? What helped you move forward? What stories would you like to hear? What themes or subjects interest you most in storytelling? Do you prefer stories of redemption like this one, or are you drawn to other types of narratives? Are there particular life experiences or challenges you'd like to see explored in future stories? My reflection on this story. As I worked with this narrative, several elements struck me as particularly powerful and some as potentially problematic. Strengths. The story handles moral complexity well. Marlene is neither fully absolved nor condemned. She remains accountable, while also being allowed humanity. This nuanced approach to guilt and redemption feels honest. The reality is that some actions cause irreversible harm, and simple forgiveness isn't always possible or even appropriate. The transformation from self-destruction to service is psychologically credible. Marlene doesn't suddenly become happy or forgiven. She finds purpose, which is different and more achievable. The story accurately depicts how people living with moral injury might channel their guilt into prevention work without expecting that work to erase their failures. The supporting characters feel real. Rebecca's inability to forgive, even while acknowledging Marlene's good work, rings true. Many people in Rebecca's position would feel exactly this way, grateful for the prevention work, while still unable to restore the relationship. The story could be read as suggesting that personal tragedy must be transformed into public service to have meaning, which isn't true or healthy. Many people who experience loss or cause harm process it privately, and that's equally valid. The narrative arc risks implying that Marlene's worth depends on her advocacy work rather than her inherent humanity. The 23 years of complete isolation and self-punishment, while showing the depth of Marlene's guilt, borders on unrealistic. Most people would have been involuntarily hospitalized at some point or would have died by suicide. The story acknowledges this somewhat, but might understate the severity of living in such complete isolation for over 2 decades. The relatively neat resolution, documentary success, legislation passed, reconciliation with Daniel, limited reconciliation with Rebecca, book published, could feel overly redemptive. Real life is often messier, with less clear progress and fewer tangible victories. The concept of moral injury is real and well documented, particularly in military contexts and among healthcare workers. The story's depiction of how it manifests, constant self-blame, inability to accept comfort, belief in irredeemable badness, is accurate. Laurie's therapeutic approach is sound. The question, who benefits from your suffering, is precisely the kind of reframing that helps people with moral injury distinguish between appropriate accountability and self-destructive punishment. The documentary, causing both positive impact and public vitriol, is realistic. People who share vulnerable stories publicly often experience both gratitude and judgment, particularly around child safety issues where emotions run high. Moral questions. The story raises genuine ethical questions. Can redemption exist for unforgivable acts? Is accountability compatible with healing? Can someone who caused harm through negligence also be a victim of their own mistakes? I appreciate that the story doesn't provide simple answers. Marlene never stops carrying guilt. Rebecca never fully forgives. And the prevention work doesn't erase the original tragedy. This ambiguity feels honest. However, the story does ultimately suggest that Marlene's life has value and meaning despite her catastrophic failure, which some readers might find offensive or inappropriate. The question of whether someone in Marlene's position deserves peace or purpose is deeply personal and culturally variable. Technical craft. The structure, moving from present crisis backward to explain the tragedy, then forward through the journey of redemption, works well. The specific details, orange floaties, 22-minute phone call, small white casket, ground the tragedy in painful reality. The pacing occasionally drags, particularly in the middle sections covering the early volunteer work. Some repetition of themes could be condensed. However, this repetition also mirrors how trauma actually works. The same thoughts and feelings cycling endlessly until gradually something shifts. Final thought. This story attempts something difficult, portraying someone who caused a child's death through negligence as still deserving of humanity and capable of meaningful contribution. Whether it succeeds depends largely on the reader's own beliefs about accountability, forgiveness, and redemption. What's your perspective? I'm genuinely curious about how this story landed for you.